In this video, we're going to be taking a tour of the WordPress dashboard. This is one of the first screens you're going to see after logging into your website for the first time. Now, there's a few things that we need to go over before we dig into the tutorial. The first thing is we're going to be covering a lot of sections right now, so we're going to put timestamps on the screen so that if you need to come back and reference this video later, you can jump right to the point that you're looking for. The second thing is that you're not expected to remember everything that we cover in this tutorial. You're not even expected to remember any of it. This is more of a tour and a demonstration so that you can get used to going through the different WordPress screens and kind of seeing where everything is. Lastly, you don't necessarily need to follow along on your own website while we're going through these screens. Just kind of sit back and watch as I go through different things. I'll be setting up different examples so you can see, so you don't necessarily need to do the same things on your website. Towards the end of the tutorial, we'll begin building the page structure of your site and begin kind of putting things together, and that's when you can follow along on your own site. And I'll tell you when it's time to get started. So for now, let's begin by taking a tour of the home screen of the dashboard. The first time you'll log in, you'll see the Welcome to WordPress block or widget. So these boxes of information, and you'll see them both on the back end and the front end. They're referred to as widgets. Yeah. So this first one is kind of a getting started widget, and it has some links to kind of create your first post or create a first page and these kind of things. And it's really just there for the first time that you're getting into WordPress, so you can kind of get quick access to different things. The at a glance widget shows you about the content on your site. So it's a post count or a page count or how many comments. It also tells you what version of WordPress that you're running in your current theme. And it also, you can see it has search engines discouraged. And what that means is when we installed our website, we checked that box that said, prevent search engines from finding our site, which is what we want to do when we're building our site on a staging site. The activity block tells us recent posts or recent comments that have happened on our site. And this is useful if you have multiple authors or multiple editors that are going to be submitting content to your site. This is a good way for you as the admin to kind of come in and see who's posted what, and if there's any articles or posts that require approval from you. The quick draft box is a quick way, kind of if you have an idea for a blog entry or a news article and you're not ready to actually write it right then, the quick draft box is a great way to kind of store ideas for later. And what this does is you can put in a title and you can put in a couple paragraphs or a couple lines or even a couple notes to yourself on what that blog post is going to be, and it'll save it as a draft. So a draft is an unpublished blog entry. It's not ready to be seen on the front end, but it's stored or saved in the back end so that you can kind of go back in later. The editor on this is very simple. There's not the formatting options that you'll see later in the real editor. So it's really just a kind of a way to store ideas or get an initial draft going until you have time to go back and do it. And the last is the WordPress events and news. And as stated, it kind of gives you some updates on WordPress itself, if there's some new, bigger features coming out, or if there's some, events in your local area that are about WordPress, things like that. Now, the thing to know about the dashboard is that this is completely customizable. So you can move widgets around just by dragging and dropping them. And as you install more plugins and even some themes, they'll add administration widgets to this screen. And you can kind of choose which ones you'd like to see or which ones you'd like at the top, depending on what's more relevant to you. So keep an eye out for that. As you add plugins, you might have some more information on this dashboard screen. Now, the entire thing is completely manageable. Like I said, up here in the top right, there's a tab called Screen Options. And if you click on that tab, you'll see a checkbox for each widget that's shown on the screen. And if you want to hide information, you're not concerned with WordPress events and news, you just uncheck that box, it disappears. And you can get rid of all of them. And just, this option is always here. The Screen Options is on just about every page, and it usually has options for what you want to see or what fields you want to have. So you can organize this any way that you'd like. Again, just by dragging and dropping or completely hiding or showing widgets in total. So now that we looked at the home screen, but let's take a look at the WordPress kind of interface in general. All right. So this right column is always going to be the main content that you're looking at, or the main editor, or the main screen with information. You have your navigation bar on the left, which leads to every part of the site. And you have this black bar at the top. And this black bar is going to show up. You'll see if I look at the front end of the website. It's also going to show up on the front end, and this is going to show up to you as an administrator, and sometimes it can also show up for users depending on how you have your settings set up, and we'll show you. It doesn't mean that they can get into the back end, but there'll be a way for them to edit their profile and things like that, but we'll talk about that later. But the point is that you always have this black bar even when you're on the front end. So later on we'll show you if you're looking at a page, you can just click the edit screen or the edit link on this black bar and go right into editing. It also has a quick links menu to create a new post or a new page. It has a comments count or comments looking for approval. This little icon here, we're going to talk about in a second. This tells you if your website has any plugins or themes that need to be updated. This customize link leads to the customizer, which we'll talk about when we get into front-end themes. And on the right-hand side, you have the edit profile link and a logout button. And it just gives you quick links to get to certain areas of the admin screen. So let's head back to our dashboard here. And one of the first things we're going to talk about is also one of the most important. A lot of people are concerned about when they get into websites, they're worried about security, and they're worried about hackers and these kinds of things. And the most important thing that you can do when you're managing a website is to always keep everything up to date. And this includes WordPress core, it includes WordPress plugins, and it includes WordPress themes. And when we talk about plugins, this is why we talk about using, kind of verified plugins or plugins that have been around for a while, because you want to be careful about using plugins that may not be around, or the developers, excuse me, the developers may not be around in a month from now, and then your plugin's not going to be updated as WordPress updates or as PHP updates. So we'll recommend to you the plugins that you should use, and if you keep your choices within those, then you'll be pretty safe. But just normally when you download plugins, and again, we'll talk about this later, you want to get them either from the plugin repository or from some commercial source, whether it be Theme Forest or Code Canyon or one of these others, which we'll go over. As long as you're getting your plugins from verified source, it's not so much just that some of them can be not written properly, but also that they won't be updated later. So everything that WordPress tries to keep everything very simple and very easy, and updates is also one of those. So as long as you're using the plugins that we discuss here on Latte Press, you'll be fine. And when you have a website update, whether it be for core or for themes or plugins, this little notification icon is going to pop up. So you can see that right now, because I've just freshly installed WordPress for this tutorial, that I have 9 updates that are ready. And so you should be checking every day or two to see whether or not your website has updates that are ready. And the update process could not be simpler. If WordPress core has an update, you'll see right where it says reinstall now, there'll be update to version, whichever, and you just click that button and it updates. Once in a while, it'll have an additional step where it'll say your database needs to be updated or something like that. And that's also true for some plugins like WooCommerce and stuff like that. There's just a button, you just click it, WordPress will update, and you're all set. Same thing for plugins, and I'll show you that process right now. You can click them individually, or you can click the select all button, which will select all, and then just click update plugins. It'll go through the plugin update. It'll tell you if it's successful or if it's failed. If it's failed, it'll give you some kind of message, and then we can go back to the WordPress updates page. And I'll do the same thing with my themes. Update them all at once. All the 2017 or 2014, these are the official kind of WordPress themes that come with WordPress, and they have a new one every year. Because I'm doing my tutorials on Pantheon, because I want to spin up a lot of staging sites. They include all of them just for fun, but I'll delete those before we go forward. So now that we have all of our themes updated, we'll go back to our page and we'll see we're all set. Now, in the future, right now, you're going to be working on a staging site. So a staging site is where we kind of do all of our work, where we experiment, where we update things. So in the future, though, after you launch your website, you're going to have 2 versions of your site running at the same time. You're going to have a staging site, and you're going to have a live site. And if you're on Pantheon, you're also going to have a test site in the middle, which is kind of fun, but we'll go over that later. But essentially what you want to do is when you're adding plugins or you're testing things or you're updating plugins, you always want to do it on your staging site first, and then check for any issues. They're very rare that a plugin update or a theme update actually causes an issue, but it's always good to check, just so if you do have traffic going to the site, they don't get interrupted or something doesn't break. And then once you've updated on your staging site, you've checked everything is good, then you'll go to your live site, you'll take a backup of it, which we showed you how to do when you set up your hosting. You'll take a backup of your site before you update on the live, just in case. And then we do the live update, and then you're set. So it's just a kind of a couple steps because it saves you from any issues that might come about from updates and just kind of a nightmare, because backups are very easy to restore. So if something breaks, you just restore it. You do some Google foo, or you come on Latte Press and you ask us, hey, what's up? What do I do? And then we can solve the problem without ever affecting your live sites. Also, one other thing to notice, when you do update your website, when you're running this, your website will briefly go down just for a couple seconds, and it'll pop up a standard WordPress maintenance saying, this website is down for scheduled maintenance. It just lasts a couple seconds, but it's something to be aware of. So you might want to do it earlier in the morning or later at night, or whenever, based on your Google Analytics stats, which we'll go over. You can see when your peak traffic times are, and you can do it in off-peak times. It's usually better. So that's updates, and that's really all it takes. That's 90% of WordPress security, is just keeping the software up to date, kind of similar to Microsoft Windows or something like that. Once an update comes out, anybody who might be malicious is going to know where the holes are. And so the best thing to do is always just keep your website up to date. Check it every day or every other day, however often your schedule permits, but as often as possible, and then run those updates as soon as you can. So now that we've gotten that out of the way, we're going to go through the content sections of WordPress, and that is posts and pages and media and comments. So posts and pages are the main content that comes along with a WordPress website. So there's two main pieces of content in every WordPress website, and it's posts and pages. So the first thing we need to talk about is what's the difference. And the easiest example to use to explain that is what it's used for most, which is a WordPress blog. So on our website, we'll have, the standard pages, assuming that you're creating a business site, but this applies to everything. So you have your home page, which is the introductory page, and you have all your basic information. You might have an About Us page, a services page, and a contact page. And if you want to have a blog, you'll have a news page. So those are all pages. They're kind of static content. They're containers with content in them, and you won't be adding pages probably very often. You'll just go back and update information where it's needed. A post would be the blog entries, so the individual blog entries. So on your blog page, and we determine in the settings later which page is going to be responsible for our blog entries. On that page is going to contain all of your blog entries. And so that's kind of the idea between a page and a post. A page is kind of a container of content, where a post is, multiple things, multiple entries that are added, over time, usually sorted by date or some kind of thing. They have categories that they go in. They have tags applied to them. So they have meta information that's along with them. And they're usually contained on a page. So and this post technology, or this idea, we can extend that later on using something called custom post types. And custom post types use that same kind of functionality, but it can be used for any kind of content. So if you wanted to have a job board on your website, or you wanted to have a business directory or classified ads, or really anything that you can think of that has kind of a post that would be submitted or created over and over and over again, either by you or by your users, to be listed on a page in some kind of specific way, you can use that post system. And we'll talk about that later, but just kind of something to keep in the back of your head, that those are all different kinds of posts. So it's not just blog entries, but you can use that for all kinds of different content. But we'll get into that later. So right now, let's just jump in and look at the posts page. And this is going to list to you all the posts or blog entries or what have you that we're using. The first one is always Hello World. That's one that's installed by default. So we'll just take a look at this table here. So Hello World is the blog entry title, the author name, the category that it's in, and there's a default category. If there are no categories, there's got a default category called uncategorized. And all posts go in there by default to start with, but we can change that later. Then we have any tags. This post doesn't have any tags associated with it. We have a comment, one comment here, which is a test comment, and the time it was published 40 minutes ago, which is when I set up this website for the first time. If you hover over the title, you'll see 4 links here. So edit, that brings up the main edit screen so we can edit our post. quick edit, which brings up the meta information for the post, which is our title, which is our slug, and slug is a term that means the part of the URL at the end. So if you have, you know, mydomain.com/blog/title of the entry, that title in the URL, so for this it's hello-world because we can't have spaces in our URLs, and that's called a slug, or a computer readable name of our title. So whenever you enter in a title to create a post, the system will automatically create a slug, but you may want, for SEO purposes and stuff like that, we'll talk about it later, want to change it or manually change those slugs. So we'll talk about that as well. It has the date that it was published and the category it's in, the tags, whether or not you want to allow comments on the post, pings, which are, we'll talk about a little bit later, but it's kind of how the way the websites communicate with each other, and trackbacks and things like that. And the status, published, pending review, and draft, and make this post sticky. And these things we'll go over as we go through it. But pretty simple information. If you want to change any of this stuff, or, you know, post date, a blog entry, something like that, you click update or just cancel to get out of it. Trash is to delete the post, and view is to open the post on the front end. So here's my post on the front end, my test comment. This is my blog entry. So for now, we're gonna delete this hello world just like you can, because we don't need it. It's just there to kind of give you an idea of the post process and what's involved in it. So we trash it. Once you trash a blog entry, you're going to see this trash. So all, that shows all, and trash shows all of your deleted posts. So even after you delete something, it's not completely gone. You can always get it back, and if you go in here and you click restore, it brings it back, or you can delete it permanently. And like most things in WordPress, you can select all of them by hitting this box up here, or select them individually. And I'm just going to get rid of that permanently. Now we go back to our all post screen, and there's nothing there. So let's create a new post. So we click add new. You can click add new on the left hand side, or that button at the top, and we're going to need a title for a post and some body content. So first we'll put in a post. And then I'm just going to quickly generate some content just for filler. So if you're comfortable, or you have used something like Microsoft Word or another document editor in the past, then a lot of these options are going to seem very familiar to you. So this bar at the top is our formatting bar, and this toolbar toggle, if you click on that, you get some more options down here. One of the things that you want to be careful of if you're copy and pasting either from some of the word editors or from other websites, it's going to bring in the styling from that website. So if we look at, there's a visual tab here which shows us how the content is going to look on the front end, and there's also a text tab, and the text tab is going to show us the actual HTML. So I copied something over from a site that doesn't have any specific styling, but if it did, it would show that styling within these tags, and that's where this clear formatting button, that's what that means. So if you highlight text and you do clear formatting, it removes any styles that you might have picked up, or removes any styles that you might have added, you know, depending. But in general, all this stuff is fairly straightforward. If you highlight text in the editor and you want to bold it, you click the bold button, you know, italics. If you want to create a list, you create our button list, you know, your first item, hit enter, second item, etc. It's all fairly straightforward. Creating links, if you're just highlighting text, click on the link button, type in the URL, and that's now gonna link to Google. I mean, and it's that simple. So when we get into the front end and we get into content, we're gonna be using page builders and all this kind of cool stuff to make your website, your pages and posts look awesome. But when you're talking about text, you're always going to see some variation of this editor. So it's a good idea just to kind of get used to it, and just, you know, to know what the different options mean. You can hover over them to get a description, and that's it. The content editing in WordPress is fantastic. You're not going to have any problems there. The last thing to show you before we move on to this is the Add Media button. And this is how you insert pictures into your website. Now, after you've uploaded images, they're always going to be available in this tab, this media library. If you don't have images yet, you can go to the upload files, and you can either click this and select files from your computer, or you can drag and drop them onto the screen, which I will do very quickly. So we have a family here, so we want to insert that into our post, and there we go. We have our picture. And now you can see in our media library it's there. If we click on this, we can see some information. So this is the URL of the image itself. This is the title. You can put in some titles and captions and alt text and descriptions. This is usually good for SEO stuff. So we want to be using pictures that are relevant to our content. We want to be using pictures that have a purpose. We don't want to just throw images on the website to have images. They should all be aligned with the content or have a specific purpose, in which case it's worth putting in the effort to go through and put in the information about the image. The alignment, left, center, right, or none. The link to can either link, if it's the media file, it's going to just load up the image in general. So it'll load up the original image. The attachment page is the page that WordPress creates to handle the image, to view the image. So essentially just view this image on a page, or a custom URL. So if you wanted people to click on it and go to Google, then you click that and you'd put in the URL. And the size is how big do you want the image to be. There's a couple of preset formats in WordPress, which we can also change later. Thumbnail, medium, and just the full size of the image. And that's it. I'm just gonna say for now, while we're going through this and while you're creating your initial pages and your page structure, do not worry about putting in your content. And if you have your content all prepared, then that's fantastic. Drop it in if you want to, but just keep in mind that all the content you put in now is just going to be placeholders, because later on when we get into front-end design, we're going to be taking some time to style things, and I'll show you different ways to create page layouts and stuff like that. And so all your content is going to be in a different format later on as you start to get the the creative process going and start entering that in. So don't worry, don't get caught up with how the website looks for now, and don't get caught up with trying to put all your content in the perfect places now, because everything is going to change. I would even say, when we're creating pages in a moment, don't even put content in, or just put a paragraph of the lorem ipsum, which is just kind of a filler, and don't get caught up on it now, because it'll just distract you. And for right now, we just want to worry about getting our site set up and our initial structure going. So this is our first post. We have a title now. We have some content up here. You can see I named it My First Blog Entry. So my slug is automatically generated. And on the right-hand side, just really quickly, there's also this distraction-free writing mode. So if you are writing content later on, you can kind of zoom in and it removes everything else kind of out of your way so you can focus. On the right-hand side, the first box is the publish, which we'll get to in a second. The second is format. Now, a lot of the things that we're going to talk about are based on the theme that you're using, or in LattePress case, the theme or the plugin that you're using to create your pages. And the thing is that when theme developers create their theme, they create post formats, which are, whether if your post is a normal blog post, or it might be a post that's the featured item is an image or a video or a link or a photo gallery. And what they'll do when they're creating the themes, they'll create predefined layouts depending on what the main focus of the content is. This also goes towards where menus are located, or where the front end widgets are located. So those blocks on our front end. So if we look at our blog entry, these recent posts, recent comments, archives, those are all widgets, and where those widgets can go are determined by the theme creator. And these post formats, whether or not they have those templates, layouts available, also depending on whether or not they put the work in to do it. But again, we're going to be using front-end page builders and stuff like that, so largely you're going to be able to ignore this. But in the future, if you're using a theme that is not the ones that we cover in our tutorials, you may want to pay attention to this and see which post layouts they have available for you. So for now, we can ignore that. You can collapse that. Categories is the, you're going to hear taxonomy a lot. And taxonomy is essentially categories are a way to differentiate between content. And there's two different types of taxonomy that are in WordPress. The first is a word that I have trouble pronouncing, which is hierarchical. I think that you know what I'm trying to say. And it's kind of a category structure, and you can have main categories and subcategories. And then the other type is tags. And tags are more similar to like the Facebook and Twitter, the hashtags, things like that. They're kind of keywords that define content, that are kind of applied to content rather than content belonging to it. And so to give you a good example of how these should be used, a lot of people make the mistake when they start doing a blog, they think, well, I'll have 50 categories, and whenever I create a blog post, it'll be in like 10 of them. But this is actually a mistake. We want to try to avoid that. When you're creating categories, you want to create categories that are going to cover a substantial amount of your content. And each time we write a blog post, we want it to be in one category, or one category and then a subcategory that belongs to that. So to give you a good example of what we should put as categories and what we should put as tags, I read a great example on another tutorial system called WP101, and they had a video and had a great explanation for this. I believe it was with WP101, and it's about a food website. So if our example is a food website, our categories would be, let's say, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. So to create a new category, we just click add new category, and we just type it in. And if you make a typo or a spelling mistake, like I do a lot, you can edit this later. I'll show you how. So let's just put in breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then if we wanted to create a subcategory, I don't really have a good example for this, but let's say that we want to do brunch. We'll do brunch as a subcategory of lunch. It's a little bit silly, but you get the idea. But if you were doing, like, let's say a television show website, you could have, HBO shows as a main category, and then like Game of Thrones as a subcategory, or Rome, or any of those other things. And then for our tags, the kind of things that we put in for tags would be maybe the food that was in those meals. So you could have, as a tag, you could have bacon, right? And bacon really should be part of most meals if you eat meat. But it'd be something like that. So you have the meals would be the categories, and the foods, which could be included in multiple categories. So each post should belong to one category, but a tag might be applied to multiple posts throughout categories because it might share some element, and that's usually the best way to do it. So we want to have a post in one category, but you might have 5 to 10 tags in a post, depending on how big your content is. You don't want to put them just to put them, but it's a good way for people to be able to kind of navigate through your site quickly into topics that they're interested in, which may span more than one categories. And that's how we prevent having to have a blog entry in 15 categories, is by creating really nice ones, and then having our tags be the ones that are connecting things on a larger level. So, and now that we have our content in there, all we need is a featured image. And what a featured image is, it's the main image for a post, and how that's displayed on the front end, again, is dictated kind of by your theme. So they might have the big image at the top of the post kind of in a highlighted fashion, and they'll have that set as the featured image location, and this is where you put that in. You just click, it's just like uploading an image, click set featured image. You can upload a new one, or just select the one from your media library. And now we have a completed post. So we have a couple options here. The first is to save it as a draft. So it's not perfect yet. You want to add to it later, or you're just putting these in there to get them in there, and you're going to go back and fix them later. You can save it as a draft. You can click preview, and that'll open it up in a new window. So you can kind of take a look at how it looks on the front end. See, this is my featured image. So in this theme, they put it here, and that's what they'll all look like on the main page. And the last one is publish. You could also use this publish setting to, you can have a post schedule in the future by putting in a date and time in this. But in general, we'll be using the publish button to publish our posts as soon as we're done writing them. And there we go. So our post is now live on the front end. So that is post. That's how you'll create blog posts, and it's also how you'll create other content in the future. If we do anything with custom post types, it'll be the same kind of setup and structure. There may be a couple custom fields or things, but we'll get into that later. So the next thing that we can talk about now is our really quickly, we'll go over post categories and tags. So you can create them through that interface in the post editor. You can also go in and manage them by clicking on the categories. You can add new ones, select the parent, edit existing ones, or you can do the same thing with your tags. Those are all kind of saved in the system, and you can manage them through here. The second is media. You can see the image that I uploaded earlier, and this is just kind of storage for all the images that you're going to use on your website. Normally you won't really add images this way, but if you had a ton of images that you knew you were going to use, this is a good way to kind of upload them all at once. So you can just select them from your computer and drag and drop them, and they'll all end up in your media library. Comments for your posts. Want to comment, depending on your settings, when somebody comments on your website, if you allow that, they may or may not need approval depending on how you've set up your site. But regardless, they'll show up on this table, and this is a way for you to manage your comments. And if you can't see them now because there's no test ones, but we'll show you later. If you hover over it where the other links are, there's just a link for approve or unapproved, depending if that's something that you have set up, and you can delete them or anything else that you want to do from here. And the last part of content is pages. And just like our Hello World post, there is a sample page that's included with the default word installs. This is fairly similar. You have the title of your page, you have the author name, the comment count, and if you allow comments, and the date that it was published. We can do our quick edit. Most people don't allow users to comment on their pages, but if that is something that you wanted, you can click on this allow comments button. And we can trash this because we aren't going to need that, and we'll go to the same kind of way. We'll go and we'll delete that permanently, and then we'll click add new to create our new page. And this is incredibly similar to creating a post because content-wise they're fairly similar. So we need a page, we need page content, and then we'll get into the differences between pages and posts. So I just quickly, created my home page, which I'm going to use later on, and everything else about that is exactly the same. For page attributes, well, let me show you. Let me publish this first, and then I'll create a new page because I want to show you the parent subparent thing. So we're going to make this our About Us page. So under the page attributes, you can click a parent page. Now, when would you use this? So if I had on my business page, I had my About page, my home page, let's say a services page, and my contact page, and my blog. And under my services, I also wanted to have a page for each service that I offered. And on that individual page, I would give more details. So the services page would kind of be an overview of what we offer, and then on each page, so for my company, we have a services page, and then we have web development and web design and SEO and these kind of things, and each of them has their own page with specific and detailed content. And in that case, because we want to keep our WordPress website as structured and organized as possible for later on, especially if we've got a lot of pages, so my web development page, I would select my services page from this, so it would be a child of that. And so the services is the parent of the children, and the child would be the individual services. And then the order is where these pages kind of show up if that matters to you. Wherever it's listed, if you put it a specific order, they'll show up in that order. But you can manage menus and things like that on your own, so there's not a ton of uses for this, but there are out there. So if you need to order your pages in a specific way, you can do that. And then we have the featured image, which works exactly the same as our featured image for our posts, and our publishing options, which work exactly the same. So once you've mastered posts, you've mastered pages. They're pretty interchangeable until later on when we get into more of the more complicated stuff. And that's it for our content section. So we've mastered content already, and so we're going to go into some of the more technical or administrative parts of the website. So the first one we're going to do is the appearance, and this is themes and the customizer and widgets and menus and some other stuff. So we'll get right into themes. If you click on themes, and this is what manages the front end of your website. And so I have the 8 themes that came with my WordPress install. So you can see that this one, the 2017 theme, is active, and that's why it has the little active thing. And if I can click on it, I can get more details about who created it, some information about it, things like that. If you click on an inactive theme, you can also delete it by clicking this delete button down here and confirming. So to install a new theme, there's 2 ways to go about it. You can either upload a file, or you can go through the WordPress repository, which I'll show you in a moment. So when we're talking about uploading themes, so if you downloaded one of the themes that we recommend and cover, it'll normally 99 times out of 100 come as a zip file, .zip. And once you have one of those, if you click on Add New and you click on Upload Theme, click on the Choose File button, select the zip file from your computer, and then click Install Now, and that's it. The theme's installed. And then you can, on your themes page, it will now show up, and you just hover over it, click the Activate button, and that theme is now activated. And that's it. That's as complicated as it is to install a theme. The other way is if you click on the Add New Theme, it'll open up the WordPress repository, which you can do this on the actual WordPress.org website. You can click on a repository and download themes directly. But there's no reason to do that, because right within your WordPress website, it can bring in everything that's in the WordPress repository. So all the themes and plugins that are listed there are available through this backend. So this, you can search through themes here, and these are all the kind of the themes that are free right from the WordPress repository and very easy to install. You just kind of hover over it, you click install. It'll just take a few seconds to download the files and install it, and then click activate, and that's it. So let me reactivate my, oh, it's still activated. Okay, so 2017 is still activated. So, and that's really it. I mean, installing themes and plugins is really, really simple. It's either uploading a zip file and clicking install and then activate, and themes are the same way. You either upload them or get them through the repository, click install, click activate, and you're all set. And later on, when we have you actually install themes and plugins, we'll go through this process again, but again, it's really that simple. So with themes, now the next thing that we need to talk about is the customizer. Now we're gonna show you the different customizer options in the themes that we cover, so we'll go through this again with you, but just to have an idea that it's there again in case you decide to go off on a thing and download your own themes. If you click on the customize, this is loads up all of the sites available, or sorry, the themes available options. So themes will normally build in options for you to change colors or titles, or arrange your widgets, or these different kinds of things from kind of a global perspective. So we want to change these things everywhere. This is the 2017 theme. So again, it has my site title, my tagline, whether or not I want to display them, I have them up there, a site icon which is like the fave icon that shows up before the URL. And then my colors, I can click dark or, custom. I can choose my own, crazy colors. You just normally for changing, uploading your logo or uploading a header background image and just little stuff like that. So it's just kind of important to know that this exists. You won't be using it until later on, and we'll go through those customizer options with you. But just know that majority of themes have customizer options that you can check out. Some more advanced themes might also have their own separate theme options, and we'll go through those with you as well. But that's it. So now we're going to talk about widgets, and like we learned before, the widgets are the pieces of content or the blocks that are in our sidebars. So for example, on the side of our blog page, a lot of them will have a sidebar, and it also covers the footer areas. So those blocks of information that we want to put in our footer. So to manage widgets, and these are all the available widgets that come with WordPress. As you add functionality with plugins, those plugins might also have widgets that they add, and you'll see them available here. The order that they're listed here is also the order that they're shown in the front end. You can organize them by just dragging and dropping. It's really that simple. If you want to edit the options, so if you want the widget to have a certain title, you can change the number of posts on the recent posts. Just things like that. It's very simple options, and if you change something, just click on this little save button. When you reorganize widgets like here, that's already saved. You don't have to click save, but if you click on them and you change an option, click the save button. And just all these have a description, so you can kind of read through them and see if there's something that you want. They're very easy to add. You just click on it, click the location that you want to add it to. So let's say I want to add this to my footer, add the widget. Give it a title, click save, and now that's added to my footer. And again, these locations, so the blog sidebar of the footer 1 and a footer 2, those are dictated by the theme that I'm using. So this is how they'll tell you where it's allowed to put these blocks of information in, and you can drag and drop them into the locations and set them up how you want. Now, because we're going to be using page builders later on, we're going to have a little bit more control and power over where our widgets are displayed and how they are. But it's always good to know that this is where the main interface for managing your widgets. The next item is menus. So when you first go to this screen, there's no menus created by default. So we'll just pop in, let's say, the main menu. So this is the menu that's going to be at the top of our website. Type in main menu, click on the create menu button. And then you can see the pages that we created are over here on the left. and the menu settings are here. Now this automatically add new top level pages to this menu. Now what that means is every time you create a page that is not a child, so our services page would be the parent, the individual services would be the children. So if you're adding a parent page with no parent page above it, it would automatically be added to this menu. I don't see that being useful in a lot of places because you're normally going to want to have a specific order to your main menu and things like that. But if for whatever reason that is something you wanted, that's how you do it. Below this is the location, and like other things, where your menus can be are dictated by the theme that you're using. And so this theme, the 2017 theme, has two locations, the top menu and the social links menu. So we know that we want this as our top menu. So we're going to click on top menu and click save. And adding menu items is just as simple as checking the box. This is the most recent, so the page you created most recent. You can also click on the view all button or search through your pages if you have a bunch of them. But it's quite easy. Just check the box and click add to menu. It'll show up. And then you can change certain options by clicking this toggle, such as the navigation label. So let's say that the name of your page is My Amazing Services, but you don't want My Amazing Services to be in your menu, and so this navigation label, you would just change that to services. So this is a way for the menu item text to be different than the actual name of the page. I will add the About Us page here just so I can show you as well. These are all drag and drop. You can also make a sub page by slightly indenting it, and this will create the drop down effect if your theme supports it, and most of them do. Next, you can also add posts to your menu if you want in the same fashion. You can also add custom links, although I don't recommend it, but if you did need a main menu item to link to another website, you type the URL in here. The link text would be the name, the text of the menu item. And you can also do categories. So if I wanted to link to my breakfast category of my blog post, I would click breakfast, and that will bring it to what's called the archives page, or the page that lists all of my breakfast posts, my breakfast related posts. And that's it, and that's how we manage menus. The next item is the plugins, and let me save that first for later, and then we'll go to plugins. And like I said, these are all incredibly easy. The plugins that come with WordPress are Akismet, which is an anti-spam, which is a third-party paid service that you can use, and Hello Dolly, which is just kind of an example plugin. I don't recommend keeping these just because we're not going to use them, and there is no reason to have a plugin installed in your system, deactivated or not, that your website isn't using. So if you've used a plugin and you no longer need it, don't just deactivate it, delete it, get rid of it. The fewer plugins we have, normally the better, and just as a general rule, it's less things to keep updated. And not that that's a huge deal or anything, but just as a general rule, the least amount of plugins that you use, the better. If you have to use a bunch, but get rid of them after you're done with them. So to delete them, it's similar to Pages and Posts. To delete them, we can just click the Select All button, and we're gonna, if they're activated, you can deactivate them. You can click this Activate to turn them on. You can click on the Delete button to get rid of them. But we're just gonna delete these two quickly. And just to show you how to install a plugin, it's the same kind of thing. If you download a plugin or you've purchased one from somewhere and need to upload it, you click on Upload Plugin, choose File and whatever, and click Install Now. Or you can add them from the repository. So you can search for a plugin if you have a specific one, but let's just install this Akismet, which I just deleted, just to kind of show you. Click on Install Now. So that's installed now. Now it turns to an Activate button. You can also look at the reviews of the plugin, pay close attention to the last time it was updated. So you can see if it wasn't updated for a year, you probably don't want to use that plugin. It'll also tell you whether or not it's compatible with your current version. You can click on More Details, which brings up a pop-up window that gives you even more information, installation questions, facts, supports, things like that. Once it's installed, click on Activate to activate it. And now you can see this is asking me to set up my account and things like that, but we don't want to do that. So we're just going to deactivate that again and delete it again. So right now we have no plugins on the site, and everything is kind of cool. There's also an editor under themes and an editor under plugins, but what this is actually, it's actually to edit the plugin files themselves, like the PHP code within them. And later on, we're actually going to disable these editors so that if somebody did happen to get access to our site, they wouldn't be able to edit the files on the server and add in any kind of malicious code. So we're going to get rid of those later on, but for now, just ignore them. It's probably not a good idea to go in there and mess around with PHP files unless you're a PHP developer. And even then, specifically with plugins, it's not a good idea to ever update a plugin through the code, changing lines of code, because when that plugin updates, you're going to lose all your changes because it's going to copy over all those files. Then same thing with themes, but we're going to be using what's called a child theme, which will allow us to make certain changes to a theme without having those changes overwritten when the theme's updated. So I'll show you that later, but for now, just stay away from the editor unless you kind of know what you're doing with PHP code and things like that, and setting up child themes and stuff. The next thing we're going to talk about is users. So if you click on users, it's going to show you all of the users in your system. Right now, it's just my administration account. It shows you the username, their actual name if it's inputted into the system, their email address, the current role, and the number of posts that they've created. Now, one thing that I do recommend, and it's going to require a second email address from you, because different user accounts in WordPress need a unique email address. But one thing that I recommend, just for a minor security protection, is to create what's called an editor account for your website, and that editor account will actually manage all of your content. And the reason is we want to kind of separate the administration of the site from the front end of the site. So there's 5 roles that come with WordPress out of the box, and that is the subscriber, which is just like a normal registered user. They can usually post comments and things like that, edit their own profile. It's the basic and general role that people are applying to when they register for a website. The next is the contributor, and a contributor has access to the posts part of your administration dashboard, but only their own posts. So they can create posts in the system, but they can't publish them. Anything a contributor adds to your site has to be approved by somebody at a higher level before it can go onto the site. The third level up is author, and authors can both create and publish their own articles without having to wait for administrator approval, but only their own. The fourth is editor, and editor is kind of manages all content in the system. When it comes to posts and pages, they can approve articles, they can write and publish their own, and they can also edit and manage other posts from the other users in your site. And then we have the administrator, all the way at the top, can manage everything, can completely destroy your website, can do all kinds of cool stuff. So we want to keep that kind of separate from the content. I'm not sure if it shows up on this theme, but a lot of the time, yeah, here it is. So on a lot of times it shows the author's name on the front end. Now we can change that, but just as a general rule, I like to keep those things separate. It's not an absolute necessity, but if you do have an extra email address and you don't mind logging in with a different account depending on what your goal is, I just feel like it's a nice extra step to keep content management separate from website administration. And you're going to be able to do most things when it comes to updating your website with that editor account anyway. So if you want to add an editor account, you would just click add new, and this is also for adding any users to your website. Add in a username, an email address, the first and last name. The website and things like that are optional. It will automatically generate a password, or you can put a specific password in. If you're making it for somebody else and you want them to get an email with their username and password, you can check this, keep this box checked. It'll send them an email with a link to the site and their new username and password. And then their role. So this is where you would select the editor for your second account, or a subscriber for just somebody that you want to give an account to on the site, and click add new users. Now, to go back to what I was saying about having this show up on the front, regardless of whether you're using an administrator account or an editor account, you want to go in and add in the first and last name information that's shown here, which I'll do quickly, and then some kind of nickname, right? So we'll just do Latte Press. And then this display name publicly as, I can then change that to either some combination of my name or my nickname, and that's usually what I use. And you want to make sure that this is different from your login name. So you see before, like my username is just a bunch of different arrangement of numbers and letters, and I don't want that to be shown. I want that I create those usernames intentionally so they're not easy to guess. They're just kind of random strings generated by a program, but I don't want if my username is shown, I don't want that username to be shown, because then they have 50% of my login information. So we have a display name publicly as Latte Press or Latte Admin or whatever you want to create for your site, and that will then show up everywhere, including the front end of the site. So if I update this now and I go back to my blog entry, you can now see instead of my actual username, it's showing just Latte Press. But if you hover over it, you can see at the bottom, the URL to the author is still showing my actual username. And that's, again, one reason why I prefer using an editor account. Now, as long as we have secure passwords and things like that, it's not really the biggest deal for them to have your username, but I figure with just a little bit more effort, we can really keep things even more secure, and it's almost always worth it. So that's creating users and viewing users in the back end. The next section is tools, and we're going to skip that for now because we're going to get into those later on, more in-depth explanation for those. But that's right off the bat, out of the box, it's for importing and exporting content from one site to another. So if you're creating a new site but you wanted to bring in blog posts, for example, from your old site, you could do an export file here, which would export your content, and then go to the import screen, install your WordPress importer, and then import the file. But we'll get into that later, but if that's something you want to do, you can check that out. And so now the last item that we're going to cover is the settings. Now I'm going to go through these kind of briefly and tell you what's on each settings page, but I'm not going to go through each individual field. There's descriptions under each thing, and everybody's how they want to set up their website is going to be different. So I'd recommend one of the first things that you do maybe after checking out the video is just go through those pages and read the different settings and the descriptions and set them up how you think you're going to need to. But there's no point in really going through them in depth, because you're going to be doing this so many times that you'll just kind of know after a while. So the general settings is your general site settings, the name of your site, your tagline, which is kind of like a slogan, the website's email address, which is going to get any site related notifications, date and time zone information, and then this membership, which is whether or not people should be allowed to register. So if you're just a company, a website, which is going to have a blog and some other stuff, you might not need anybody to register, and so it's better just to kind of leave it disabled. But if you are going to want feedback from people, or you're going to have a reason for people to register, then you just kind of check that, and then you can select which role they can have when they register. Normally that's going to be subscriber, but if you have some kind of collaborative writing website or something like that, where you're going to have a lot of people contributing content, and right off the bat, then you would want to set that maybe as contributor, and then when they create content, it's still got to be approved by you, and they don't have access to anything else in your system other than they can create content on their own and you can approve it. But generally that's going to say subscriber, and the save changes down here at the bottom. The writing is for the default post category. We talked about that before. Before you create categories, there's that uncategorized thing, which kind of everything goes into. If it's not set to another category, you can change that, the default category that posts go into, to one of your pre-formatted ones. And the default post format, which, like I said, we're not going to be using very often, so you can keep this as standard. But if you do down the line create, let's say, a video website, and all of them are going to use this video post format, it just saves you an extra step of having to select it every time. And you can also write blog posts via email. I don't really recommend that for different formatting options, but if you did want to do that, you can put an email account connection information in here, and then when you email a post to that email address, it will automatically post on your website. Under reading, we're going to manage this actually in a second, this front page displays, so I'll go over that in a minute, but otherwise it's just showing how your blog post should be arranged on the main blog page. And this last setting, which is discouraging search engines from indexing the site, that's what we talked about way in the beginning of this tutorial. If you're creating a staging site and it's on a staging URL, for obvious reasons, you don't want Google and other search engines indexing that website. Now, the hosts that we use automatically block search engines from looking at staging sites, but you want to get in the habit of making sure that that's always checked when you're creating a new website until you're ready. The only difference to this is if you are creating a website on your live domain, which you shouldn't be doing, but if you went off on a crazy tangent and decided to do that, don't discourage search engines from checking it out. Let them index it while you're building it. Worst case scenario, you're going to get some traffic ahead of time, but if it's on your main domain that you're going to use later on, you don't want to tell Google ever to not look at it, even if it's temporary. You might as well start building up that page rank right away. But in general, always build on a staging site and don't publish to live and start indexing stuff until your website's ready to go and you're ready to see people. And at that, it's the last level, or the level that you want to launch it with, or with the structure, because everything can change during development. The last is discussion, and this has everything to do with comments and when you get notifications on your site, whether or not people should be able to comment, or whether they have to register first, all that kind of thing. So that's really going to be different depending on the site, and that's all available here in the discussion section, so check that out. Media is defining the initial sizes for the images that are available. When you're adding an image to a post, you're going to have pre-formatted height and widths that the images can show up. Most of the time, it's best just to leave these as default. So unless you have a specific reason to change them, you can just leave these alone. And the last is the permalinks. Now, this is a little bit more complicated, but this determines how the URLs are generated when you're creating new posts and pages. So you can see from this example at the top, if I created a page right now or a post, it would kind of do the question mark P equals 123 or whatever the ID number of the page is. Obviously for SEO, that's a terrible idea. We don't want that. So the way that the people used to do it was by date, which is the day and name. That's set up here. There was a lot of reasons for that, whether it be performance reasons because they wanted to separate everything into folders, or they didn't want WordPress to have to queue up all of your posts to figure out which ones you wanted to view. But all of that's mainly been changed now. So the one that I recommend is a custom one. So we want to use a custom structure, and what that is, it's category post name. So we want to do /% that's not / percentage category, and another percentage at the same, and then post name. So /category /post name. So what that does, it'll separate your blog post into the category URLs. That keeps things kind of separate and organized, and then the post name. And this is also why it's important when you're creating your categories. We don't want really long names. We want to keep our categories short, succinct, and then to the point. And then we have a really nice URL structure. We have fast loading websites, and everything is golden. But if you did, for whatever reason, need to organize them by date or by month and name, or by another way, this is the section you would do it. So you just click the one you want and click on Save Changes, and you're done. So that is essentially the quick tour, or the quick way of going through the entire WordPress dashboard. And so now, if you're following along on your own, or you have your own website open and you want to follow along, we can begin to build the page structure for our site, or the kind of the basic structure. And I like to do this first. I have a certain order when I'm building websites. The first part, I like to go in and I like to create all of my pages. No content on the pages, just create the page structure that I want. I like to set up my menus and things like that. Once I'm done with my initial page structure and I've gone through the settings and set it up everything the way that I like it, then I get into functionality. So if I want my website to have contact forms or a discussion forum, or I want custom post types and different pages to display them, I'll set up all my functionality and put everything on the pages that I want them. Not specifically design them, but just put everything on the pages where they're going to be, put everything in the sidebars where they're going to be, and then I get into design. And the reason why I do it that way is because design is usually one of the things that takes the most time and has the most like little things changing. And I always find that it's good to build the design that works around the functionality and the content that you have, rather than create a design beforehand and try to fit all the functionality and the content into it. So we're designing our pages based on what is already on the page and making sure that all looks good, instead of limiting ourselves or forcing us to create more to fit into a design that we've made. So I leave the design to the last step. I worry about creating my structure, making sure my functionality works and everything on the page that I want is there, and then I'll go back into the design and create all the pages for it. And that's the way that the tutorials on WordPress work as well, because it's a really great workflow, and it removes your ability to kind of get distracted with design while you're focusing on this and kind of going back and forth. So we do it in a certain order. So if you want to follow along with me now, we'll just go through the basics really quickly of how I would start if I was going to create like a new website for a company. So the first thing I'll do is, as I have my first blog entry in there, and because I know I'm going to have a blog page, I'll just keep that in there. So you go ahead and just create a blank blog entry or a blog entry for later, just so we know how our blog page is going to be displayed on the front. Create any kind of sample blog entry for now, or just leave the hello world one in there if you that'll work fine as well. So now I'm going to create my pages. Now earlier I created a home page and about us page, and I talked about the services and the drop downs. So I'll throw those in there now. I'll also put a contact page and a blog page. So these are my individual services pages, right? So for my company, it'd be web development, web design, etc. Yeah. So we want to select the parent, which is our services page, and click publish. And you can see on the URL now we have the URL /services/services1. And we'll just do one more, services. Now we'll create our contact page. And finally, a blog page. So now if we go to our pages, we see our home page, our about us, our contact, our blog, our services, and our two child pages. Right? No content, just creating the structure for us, and it organizes them in the back end so we can very easily see where pages are and get the different things. The next thing we want to do is we want to create a menu for our main pages. So I've already created a menu, but let's delete that and just create it over again. So we have our main menu, and I want that to be my top menu, and I'm going to add in my pages, organize them in a way. You can organize these in any way. Normally I like to leave contact at the end and have my blog be the second to last item. So normally like home, about, services, blog, contact. We're going to add in our two individual services pages and a little indent there, right? Because we want them to be a drop down of our services page, and then we're going to click save menu. So now we have our pages created and we have our menu created. And for me, on my sidebar, I always recommend get rid of the meta widget, because it's normally not going to be used on most websites unless you're going to have a lot of people kind of logging in and stuff like that. We really don't need that there. So just as an example, I'll just delete that. We'll get rid of it. Now it's gone. I also want my search bar at the top, and let's say recent posts, and then comments, and then categories, and then archives. So now if we go back to our site and we click on home, we can see now I have my home, my about, my blog, my services 1 and 2, and then contact us. And as I was talking before, I put that in the wrong place. So we save it, go back and reload. Now we have home, about us, services, blog, contact us. If we go to our blog page, we could see, so one final thing that we have to do is we have to go into settings, and we have to go into reading. And this is what determines what is our home page and what is our blog page. So if you're creating specifically a blog with no other information, it's not a business website, it's just a blog, you may want the first page that users to see to be your blog page, to see your posts. And that's how it's set up by default. But if you're running a company website or some other kind of website, you're going to want a specialized home page to be on the home, and then a blog page, a page specifically for blog entries. And that's where this front page displays comes in. So we'll click on a static page, we'll click on our home page for our front page, and then we'll click on our blog page for our post page. So these are both pages that I just created, and then we assign them the roles that you would expect from home and blog. So home and blog, and then we click save. And now if we go back home, we saw our home page, and then we click on blog, and we see I had to reload because it was cached, but that's okay. On blog, now we see our first blog entry, all our nice pictures and our content in there, and then we see our updated widgets, our sidebar widgets, which are all kind of set up the way we wanted and reorganized and stuff like that. And so that is generally it. That is the whole tour of the WordPress dashboard. That is really as complicated as it gets. The more you go further with these tutorials, you're going to see exactly how easy it is to create a website with WordPress, even with some advanced functionality. The only technical barrier between you and building a website with WordPress is just knowing which plugins to use and having the experience of kind of how they work and what settings to set up. There's nothing overly complicated about building a website with WordPress. So now that we've gotten this set up, the next couple of tutorials are going to walk you through setting up your functionality, and then later on you'll get into design. So if you have any questions or you're running any problems or any part of this tutorial you felt was a little bit too confusing, please do post in the support section of our forums, and somebody will try to get an answer to you as soon as possible. Thanks for listening.